Hi, good morning.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for having
Good
me.
morning.
Good
Good morning.
afternoon
Good
to you.
morning. Yeah, it is good
Nice.
afternoon, but it's good morning for you. So I respect that.
Great to see. Thank you. This is one of our earliest boozy book clubs, but we
Yes,
are we are
I'm ready
good for
though.
it.
I have
Good, good, good.
Maria, you have your boozy tea. I have coffee.
I
But
have both. It's like an exciting Wednesday for me.
well, Al, welcome to exciting Wednesday. Welcome to Boozy Book Club, and Maria and I just finished The Man I Never Met, and we're really, really excited to chat with you about it.
Thanks. Exciting to be here.
Um, okay, so I
Do you
guess
mind
just to,
before I was going
I'm
to say
sorry.
before we kick off and start asking questions, do you mind just telling us a little bit about you?
Yeah, and I also feel like the synopsis of the book, just like in your own words, without giving away
Exactly,
too
sort
much.
of a
Yeah.
teaser for the book and just a little bit about
Okay.
you.
So The Man I Never Met is about Hannah and Davy, and Davy calls Hannah he's in Texas and she's in London, and he calls her completely by accident. He just gets a digit wrong on a number and he ends up ringing her, and he's ringing to dial in for a job interview, and she kind of sends him on his way, encourages him to go Google the right number and sort of wishes him luck and thinks nothing more of it. And then later on that night, he messages her just to say, "Oh, thanks for your help. I got the job." And then they just start messaging each other and just start connecting and kind of forming a real friendship and a bit of a bond. And then texting turns to phone calls, and phone calls turns to video calls. And then before they know it, weeks are passing and they're really, really enjoying each other's company. And they find themselves very gently, very slowly falling in love with each other, despite the fact they've never met. And then he's meant to come over to London to start the job because he gets the job, and he doesn't show up at the airport, and Hannah has to work out, what's happened and whether it was all a scam from the start or whether something's happened to him. And it's kind of about their journeys as they go off in separate directions in order to try and reconnect with each other later on. But yeah, so that's what the book is about.
Thank you. I love it. It's also such a modern, I mean, one thing that I was struck while reading it, and I read the whole thing very, very quickly, sort of tore through it, but it's such a modern concept, right? The way that they meet through it's WhatsApp, right? Is it WhatsApp?
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
WhatsApp. Yeah.
The way,
Basically that's how they kind of connect as they go through, and it's just become such an easy format to talk to people on that it's kind of just replaced phone calls in a way, hasn't it, really? Although you can leave voice
Yeah.
notes, but they're the devil in my opinion. But people
Yeah.
people just text, and it's just too easy. It's just so easy now, so that kind of brings people together. And since I wrote the book, I had some friends say to me, "Oh, this happened to me, this sort of thing happened to me," although they've either been happily married, so they're not going anywhere with it, but they're like, "Oh, I got a message from a random guy, and it was just," and then I clicked on his profile picture. I'm like, "Oh, he's really fit, but I'm married, so I'm going to leave that where it is." I think, see, this does happen. This is real.
It's so
no, it's
funny.
just
No, I
such a
love it.
contemporary, modern book in that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah,
Maybe
and I
it's a
wrote
lesson
it
for everyone to pick up unknown phone calls,
always,
I'm
unless it's
always like, ignore.
call
Yeah.
centers. Yeah, it's always call centers for me. So boring.
So I
So
was going to say,
oh, go on, Maria.
okay, yeah. Why? I guess we're kind of why we're on the plot. Like, I know this is very different from some of the other books you've written. So, kind of, how did you come up with this? Was there like, what was interesting about this plot? And obviously, Jenny said it's like very modern day, which I think was kind of fun because, like, everyone's very familiar with WhatsApp and
Yeah,
read messages and a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
drama around that. Yeah,
I think that so I wrote this book during the first series of lockdowns we had in the UK, and it is very different from what I write. I normally write historical fiction, but it does usually have a modern strand. So, a bit in the past, bit in the present, and what happens in the past informs, what's happening in the present. So I'm no foreigner to writing contemporary. I just kind of squeeze it into my historicals. And I think we had that sort of first series of lockdowns here where it was lovely. We had lovely weather in the first lockdowns, and I was outside quite a lot, and I was homeschooling, and then in the afternoons I kind of didn't have anything else to do. So in addition to writing, I was kind of thinking. I had a lot more thinking time, which is something I don't often get. And I had been mainlining a lot of very happy books, very happy romantic rom-coms, contemporary romances. And I was just sort of falling more and more and more in love with the genre. And I already write romance anyway inside my historicals. And it just kind of felt like a very natural transition. And I had the plot semi in my head, I had Davy's story in my head. So Davy appeared to me before Hannah appeared to me. And because it's quite similar to, well, it's something that happened to my husband. So one of those things I thought, well, I don't think I want to do this. I think this is too personal, too close to home. And then the plot wouldn't leave me alone, and it grew and it developed, and Hannah grew and she developed. And then I had the whole book sort of in my head, fully fledged. And it just felt like a really good time to sit and think, oh, I wonder if I can do this. And, I spoke to my husband about it and sort of said, this is kind of your story in a way. How would you feel about it? And he, thought about it for a while, and he was like, well, if it encourages people to, to go forward and do certain health things for themselves, then yeah, go for it. So then I sat down and I just started a little bit here and a little bit there. And I didn't tell my agent or any editors or anything. I just sat and I just kind of went for it. And I thought, let's see if I can do it first, because it's not historical. And it's, what if I get to, historical for me is 50,000 words in the present and kind of 50,000 words in the past, and the two stories, kind of interlinked. I thought, what if I can only get to 50,000 words of present day and I don't know what else to do with the other 50,000 words? That's not a book. So I wanted to get through and see how I could do it. And then I kind of got to the end and thought, I've done it. Got all the way there. So kind of that's how the story developed, very gently through those lockdowns, really.
It's interesting. And then, hearing about your writing process, and the two stories, you see Hannah's story, you read Davy's story, and they do end up speaking to each other, their stories. So I feel like that's an interesting application of it. Sounds like sort of the way that you think you two.
Yeah. I guess in a way it is that dual narrative where, you do get half of it as Davy, and you do get, I think, a lot more of it as Hannah, but they do interlink. And that was kind of accidental, because we're with Hannah for the vast majority of the first portion of the book, and then Davy appears, a little while after you find out why he hasn't shown up. And I got stuck at that point where Davy appears, and he wasn't going to appear at all until the end of the book. And that made no sense, because you need his point of view. You need to see where he's gone and why he's gone. You need to kind of feel Davy. You need to believe in him. You want to believe that what he's done is for the right reason for him. And I just sat and I thought, oh my gosh, I can't just lurch from Hannah to Hannah to Hannah to Hannah, and and there's nothing there. So then I just tentatively wrote the word Davy at the top of the chapter and thought, what would Davy say? And that's how he ended up coming in as a dual narrative aspect.
Yeah, and I feel like it's crazy because Hannah's, you start off with Hannah sort of as your protagonist, or who you're following, but then Davy has this wild arc, and he's in, I don't want to give anything away, but he really has a story where he, I don't know, I'll put it this way, has an opportunity to follow his dreams in a way that's quite big. So it was exciting to, okay, I had one question. It just, sorry, 9 a.m. My question just went out. Oh, I was going to ask you, sorry. One thing that I really loved, in addition to Hannah and Davy's stories, was how kind of deep and interesting and diverse in a way Hannah's friendships were. Like, she has a few female friendships that are really strong. And I just wondered if you could kind of speak to how you thought about developing those friendships, and sort of why you kind of gave us multi-generational friendships as well.
Yeah. So I think multi-generation, I think that older women are not in books very often. And, when they are, they don't really have their own plot going on. And so I really wanted Joan, who is Hannah's neighbour from across the fence, to have her own story, her own love, her own life going on, and for her life to be quite exciting. And she's inspired in part from my neighbour who lives across the road to me, who is in her 90s, so much older than Joan, lives a very different life to Joan, but who, I've been looking out for my neighbour for the best part of a decade. I'll do her bins on a Wednesday morning, I'll go and buy a flower in the lockdown, that sort of thing, mainly so she can make me sausage rolls and then tit for tat. But it's lovely, and it's and I just wanted it to be really reflective of how people live, because when we you guys don't do it so much, but in the UK, we live in kind of rows of terraced houses. Some people don't, some people do, but we kind of live quite cheek by jowl. Our neighbours, you wave each other off in the morning because we're so next door to each other. We're feet away from each other. And so I think that if you're, Hannah lives in a kind of suburban part of London, quite close to the city. And, she would have people, either side of her who she would see every morning and who she would probably get to know over and over again. And Joan is her landlady as well, which helps. And I love that. And I love how realistic that kind of that felt to me anyway. But then she also has, you know, Miranda, who's her best friend, who she used to live with, and it's just, I hope it's quite reflective of how we live really in London. So yeah, that's where that came from.
Yeah,
I loved her and Joan's chats and their coffee. And
yeah, Joan is fun. She's very ballsy. She says it how it is.
She's like, yeah, I was gonna say no filter. She just tells you how it is, and then she has like, you know, this fabulous life after. Yeah.
Marries a millionaire. Good for her.
Yeah.
I know. I like when he like sent her on the cruise,
like the month-long cruise or whatever. Yeah. That sounds pretty nice. Yeah,
it does. That's my slightly older person dream.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really funny.
So I guess this is one question, which is just kind of so. What is your idea? For me, it kept feeling kind of like this idea of like soulmates with Davy and Hannah. Do you believe in soulmates? Was that at all something that you thought about when you were writing? Or, I mean, there's obviously the story is kind of amazing.
Yeah, I do believe in soulmates. And I always think that in fiction, I guess in fiction at the end of rom-com films as well, you know, I channel those kind of late 90s, early noughties rom-com films. Like they're my everything. They're amazing. Yeah. And I think you have to believe at the end when they get together, it's for life. You know, you've invested time reading about these people, you've invested time watching these people. And I think if you're like, oh, this is just for now, that's just not cool, is it really? That's just not what we're all in this for, not investing our time in for. So I do believe in that concept of soulmates. But I think I've been very lucky because I've been with my husband since we were 18 years old. So we've known each other since forever. That. So I have that sort of, you know, that kind of life where I'm like, no, this has worked for us. We've been very lucky. It doesn't work for everybody. But I'd love to believe that. I mean, I think there's a line in the book. I think it might be Grant. I can't remember who says it. Somebody says, you know, there's a person out there for everyone. They just might not be so close to home. So yes, I think there is soulmates, but you might have to kiss a lot of frogs before you find that person. But I do think people are meant to be with people, and you know, we get there in our own way.
And you alluded to this before, going kind of back. You mentioned your husband, but I mean, you mentioned sort of at the end of the book that this is a personal story for you, and you kind of said, you know, it was our story. But do you mind like sharing a little bit about how that this was a personal story for you?
Yeah. So something that happens to Davy, the thing that it's not really a spoiler alert because he I think it happens in about 10,000 words anyway. So he gets an illness, and the illness is what happened to my husband as well. But it happened a decade or so ago when our daughter, I think it was a day before her second birthday, he got diagnosed. And it was just a bit of a long slog. He got misdiagnosed over and over again, and it got quite close to the end before we realized what was happening. And so that's where I wanted a reason in the book to keep Davy and Hannah apart from each other. And I didn't want it to be anything, you know, what they couldn't bounce back from, like one of them's cheated on each other, something like that. You know, I wanted it to be really, really real and not so hardcore that you end up thinking, oh my God, I'm going to put this book down and like put it in the freezer. You know, don't want to put the book in the freezer and leave it there. But I wanted it to be quite realistic and quite kind of, I want to make you think, you know, oh no, these two people are meant to be together. And then when they do have the chance to be together, you know, you want them to just kind of get there. So yeah, I wanted a real reason. And that's why I kind of had to say to my husband, you know, if I, you know, use this story, yeah, basically your story, our story, and in the book, you know, would you be fine with it? And he read a draft of it before he went off, and it made him quite sad in a way because he was reading things that had happened to him and reading excerpts of conversations that we had had. Although ours were shorter, I was a bit more swearier, and you know, it's slightly less emotional maybe. But I really wanted that to sort of be reflected in the book and for it to just feel real, really.
Yeah, it was just really meaningful to me when I read that sort of this was part of your personal story, your personal journey. Maria knows this, but part of the reason we started our company it had to do with my father being sick, and sort of that led to my interest in tea and botanicals. And so I just feel like so many powerful stories or ideas can come from, I don't know, things that have really impacted you or made you stronger in your life. So it was touched a chord when I kind of read your epilogue or final note.
And it's quite cathartic, I think, in a way. I guess that if you're developing your business and the kind of the basis where it came from your story, I wonder for you it's cathartic as well as it was for me to hash out on a page oh, this happened and then this happened, but you know, this is how we dealt with it, but this is not maybe how Davey's going to deal with it, you know. But it just feels like you have a basis to grow something good out of, perhaps.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think sort of knowing when you can look back at your book and think this was something that was a moment in my life that meant this, and now I've created this, and I think that too with our business. So it certainly struck a chord for me.
Yeah, it changes your life in a way, I think, and it makes you be different, do different things. You know, I wrote a book about it. You started a tea company. We do. And I hear so many stories about that, listening to other authors on podcasts, and some of them have been through maybe cancer diagnosis or you know, or they've lost somebody, and they then just completely pivot and do something completely different with their own life, or, you know, their other family members do something with their own life. And you think, yes, it does sort of make you go, okay, I'm going to live a little bit differently now. And it's quite good to remind yourself of that every now and again.
It is, but then, like, I think to the same point, which is kind of fun, right? You had this serious thing and you wrote a rom-com kind of, and I had this serious thing and I started like an alcoholic tea company. Like, you know, so,
this is it.
You know, like,
brings joy to you and it brings joy to other people, so that is a win.
So you both are bringing joy. Yeah,
we're bringing joy. The books and the tea, which I have neither, but Maria does. I got the joyful books and the joyful
it matches nicely,
go together very well. Okay, Maria, do you want to ask? I know that we're drawing to a close. Do you want to ask your favorite question, which I know can be a stumper?
Oh, this is like
Maria's favorite question.
Changing the topic.
Favorite question. I do not think this way, and every time she asks it, I'm like, I could never answer that.
It's really not. I like to. So I feel like whenever you read a story, you build your own visual of like who is each character, right? What do they look like? So I always like to ask, if you were to have this book turn into a film or a series, do you have any sense of who would play, like, who would your ideal people,
who would you cast
the characters?
I guess somebody very quintessentially English and somebody very quintessentially American. So I guess maybe somebody like Lily James, maybe for Hannah, or
Lily James,
lovely redhead girl who played Demelza in Poldark, Eleanor Tomlinson. Maybe her, you know, in the Aidan Turner version of Poldark. Did you get that in American? You must have done.
Poldark?
The red-headed girl who plays Demelza. I think her name's Eleanor Tomlinson. I think she would be lovely.
Okay, we need to
Google her. Yeah, I didn't see that.
Okay. And I think Chris Hemsworth gets a name check in the book. So, but I wonder if he's a little bit old now. Although, you know, I still think he's hot.
I mean, your characters are young.
They're young. Yeah, they're young. But I do quite fancy Chris Evans, so maybe that would work as well. But maybe he's also a little bit told. Oh God, I need to pick a 20-year-old man.
I know. I'm trying to think.
I don't know any 20. I mean, this is the fallacy of your question. Is that we're too old.
We'll have to just age them up a little bit. We have to age them up a bit. Yeah.
Okay, I get that idea.
I love a few years ago.
Exactly, in their heydays.
Yeah.
Perfect. So, I mean, I think our next and last question is just, what are you thinking for your next book? What next novel?
I've written my next book. And it's out in Britain in November, and I'm just still waiting to hear back about when it is over in North America. But it's called The Last Train Home, and it's about two people who meet on a train in London, and they both get on the last train home for the night, and they meet, and then they get wrapped up in an event, and it's about how the two of them kind of navigate that event over the course of 7 years, and how it brings them together and pulls them apart, and brings them together and pulls them apart. So so it's another will they, won't they.
Wow.
Fun.
Okay, that sounds exciting.
We'll keep our eye out. Yeah. Congrats on that. Super exciting. We'll definitely keep our eyes peeled in the US.
Thank you.
Makes its way here.
Well, thank you so much. We loved your book, The Man I Never Met, and it goes really well with Owls for Boozy Tea. And thank you so much for spending some time with us to sort of give us insight into how you conceived of the book, and hopefully not too many spoilers.
Yeah.
No, thank you for letting me on. It's been so lovely. I can't wait.
Lovely to meet you.
Thank you. And likewise, lovely ladies. It's been really nice.
Thank you so much.